invitar acá al escenario al doctor Andrés Juez. El doctor Andrés Juez es profesor titular de la Facultad de Medicina de la Universidad de Chile, un destacado investigador tanto a nivel nacional como internacional, ocupa los primeros lugares en cuanto a los rankings de investigadores tanto a nivel nacional. Es investigador principal del ACCDiS, nos va a contar un poquito más sobre eso. También es investigador principal del CEMC, que es el Centro de Estudios en Ejercicio, Metabolismo y Cáncer, y un gran colaborador del programa, miembro de nuestro comité académico y un investigador que de una forma muy altruista está ayudándonos a descentralizar la ciencia en Chile, algo que parece simple, pero que es muy difícil. Muchas gracias, doctor Juez, por estar aquí.
Okay, so I'm going to make the transition to English here. I'll give you 10 seconds to make the switch to your brain. I'd like to thank Rodrigo for a kind introduction. Also the possibility of being here today. This is the fourth time we're doing this event here in Dalke, and the difference perhaps with respect to previous occasions is that we have invited people from different universities, as Rodrigo also pointed out, and also students from different universities. So the posters you'll be seeing are not just from the program here, or students from the program here, but also from the PhD programs throughout the country. So the idea is, as Rodrigo pointed out, is to bring science, regional science, and scientists on the other together, okay? In the perspective of fostering interactions and collaborations. Okay, the topic today is information. And as you can see, we've been doing this pointed out for quite some time now, so we've started in 2019, 2020, 2021. We couldn't do the course, of course, because we were suffering the consequences of the pandemic. We did another course in 2022, January last year, and the topics we touched on were shown here, for instance, the first two related to cancer, in one also regarding with exosomes, and the last one was to problems related to the microbe. And now today, inflammation, which of course is a leading cause of essentially all sorts of chronic diseases, inflammation, development of these diseases. Now, as Rodrigo pointed out, I am director of this centre here and PI of this centre here, and as such, helping the program in its development. And so I'd just like to tell you a little bit about what these centres are. So, at the beginning, it was this centre here, the Centre for Molecular Studies of the Cell, which is a FUNDAC project that started in 2002 and lasted 2012. Unfortunately, at the time, there was no policy of continuation for such centres, so it actually ended as a FUNDAC centre in 2012. And of course, one of the objectives was to do good science, publish lots of papers, but the other objective was to train advanced human resources. So that was a major, and still is, a major objective of such centres. And as we can see here, we did so rather successfully. Then, from CEMC, the initial CEMC, the Centre for Molecular Studies of the Cell, emerged a number of initiatives. The first was the Network of Metabolic Stress Signaling Nemesis here, and then so 2012 to 2015, and then from there emerged the Advanced Centre for Chronic Diseases, and then CEMC, Centre for Molecular Studies of the Cell, I converted into the Centre for Study of Exercise Metabolism and Cancer. I'll tell you a little bit about that too. Okay, so there's considerable similarity between ACCDiS and CEMC, the new CEMC. So one seeks to identify common elements between cardiovascular diseases and cancer. And the other focuses on more metabolic aspects of the diseases, cancer also included, that also made. Studies range from looking at different molecules to evaluation in cells, organs, individuals, and there's also, of course, outreach to society. So this initial center, there were 4 PIs. Cecilia Dye was the director, I was deputy director, Enrique Heinrich PI. And initially, at the beginning, Felipe Sierra was the other PI at the center. After a couple of years, however, he left, went back to the US, and Secular Idea was incorporated. I'll just focus, for the sake of this talk today, on something we will do. So, essentially looking at diabetes and cancer. As probably most of you know, we've sort of taken a liking to this protein here. It's called fibrillin 1. I'll tell you more about that in the scientific talk then later on. And this protein plays a structural role in generating these caveolae, so imaginations of the membrane, 50 to 100 nanometers. It's involved in cholesterol homeostasis. And our studies are focused on its role in cancer, so looking how it transits from being a tumor suppressor to becoming a pathological metastasis, which probably seems a bit odd, but I'll tell you how that happens later on. And most recently, we've been dedicating our attention to what caveolin does in extracellular vesicles called exosomes, and how these exosomes can reprogram their local and distant environment, and how that in our case contributes to development of cancer. Okay, so in the context of CEMC now, what we'll be doing, this is the original study showing the caveolin, so these are cells, colon cancer cells without caveolin, form tumors in nude mice with caveolin, and we get tumor suppression, so obviously it's a tumor suppressor, we didn't know how. And one of the mechanisms we came up with is that it prevents the liberation of VEGF, which is of course a factor that is important for angiogenesis and tumor growth. If there is no angiogenesis, there is no tumor growth. In the context of such studies, we also develop collaborations now with regional universities, for instance, the Universidad de Biobío, Galo Ecudera. We just published a paper on wound healing, looking at the role of another protein in this context, Taiwan. This paper was published last year. And we have developed collaborations, of course, with Rodrigo Warner and the University of Georgia, looking at vascular senescence and collaborating on health and those issues. Now, of course, this is probably something we've seen before, how mankind has evolved over millions of years to sort of this, and then in the last 50 years or so to this, which is obviously not very favorable. So we became interested in how, for instance, dysfunction and death of beta cells comes about. This is a collaboration with Dr. Sergio Vega, or let's say he developed the studies and we helped him. And as a consequence, we have 2 papers and 2 co-tutored master students. Another important interest that we've been developing, as I've mentioned in recent years, is the focus on extracellular vesicles, particularly exosomes. So these are generated in what we call multivesicular bodies. These multivesicular bodies can then fuse with the plasma membrane here and liberate such exosomes. And such exosomes are basically like little packages with lots and lots of information, all sorts of proteins, microRNAs, and other molecules. And they are able to fuse with other cells and trigger changes in those recipient cells. So we study that in the context of cancer. And one thing we have become interested in lately is in collaboration with Mariana Cifuentes, and she'll tell you about that in her presentation, is the role of adipocytes in generating such vesicles and then reprogramming the local tumor. And this is a study you will hear about from her, and also Sofia Zambuesa, a common graduate student, as a poster on that. As I said, there are students here from Santiago, showing their results. Here. And so the idea of the project is to study how exosomes produced by adipocytes can reprogram the tumor microenvironment, generate M2 macrophages, which can promotion. So beyond these studies of scientific questions, one of the key objectives of this new CEMC was also to provide facilities that can help develop science not only in Santiago but also here in Dublin. And so what this facility houses are pieces of equipment that are sort of a bit larger than commonly available in a lab. I guess I'll be references to flow cytometer. We have a C2 confocal microscope, a spinning disc, a Pascal confocal microscope. This has been outdated by now. Things like an ultracentrifuge, which is of course crucial to developing studies focused on exosomes. And then also other besides these pieces of equipment, other facilities that permit us to work, for instance, with viruses and also pathogenic bacteria like Helicobacter pylori, which is another thing we're interested in, incubators and so on. Stereotaxis room, and of course an animal facility, which is crucial for our in vivo studies. So that's what I have to say about CEMC. Let me just mention to a little extent, and also ACCDiS. So this format center seeks to identify common causes for the main chronic diseases, so cancer, cardiovascular diseases, in the perspective of defining prevention strategies to obviously control disease development and progression. This is the timeline of ACCDiS, so it's still ongoing. We're here, year 9. We're sort of destined to end in year now, this year. This was our last year. However, there has been a change in policy such that centres of technical excellence are continued, or will be continued now for another 2 years, and then we'll have to apply for renovation. So, another year 11 and 12 here before we break, which is good news, I think. Anyway, these are the PIs of the centre. Sergio Lavandera, Director, Pablo Castro, PI, those working on cardiovascular problems, Alejandro Corvalan, myself, on cancer-related problems, Catalina Ferrecchio, epidemiology, and Marcelo Colbran, nanotechnology. And so these two are sort of go-betweens of the centre. So their purpose, well, so of course, is to connect the two areas, cancer and cardiovascular diseases, which at the onset are not necessarily directly related. And it's something we have to introduce to make it easier to understand how the centre will work. So we also have this core project called Malco, which is a population-based study. And we have a cardiovascular facility here in UBC, which is essentially something similar to what I set up in the Faculty of Medicine, and it's actually set us up in a similar way in the Faculty of Clinical Pharmacia for basically cardiovascular. This centre has now grown. We now have a new PI in the centre, so Mariana Cifuente just was recently incorporated as a PI, so instead of 6 lines, we now have 7 lines, and her line focuses on obesity, and she'll be talking about, of course, these projects here will change. What do we study at ACCDiS? Well, essentially studies contribute to understanding a large number of different problems in the area of biomedical sciences, some of which are mentioned here, so it's a fairly transversal sort of center. Just some numbers, statistics. So the center, basically in the center, there are something around 270 people. We don't need to go into the details, but the main thing here is that about 60% of the people in the center are, of course, people in training. Like I said, the emphasis of these centers is always on training advanced human resources. And so we have PhD students, master students, undergraduate students, and also postdocs up here, about 60% of all people in the centre. Of course, some stats on productivity. So this is a bit outdated. It's from 2020. I wasn't able to get the more recent numbers, but at that time it was 380 publications, so that would have been about 7 years. Meanwhile, I would say we have about 100 publications more. The average impact factor at the time was 5.4, it's probably around 6 now, and so on and so forth. So the centre has been doing extremely well. This again just to emphasize the research strategy. So digestive cancers, heart failure, sort of the two ends of the story here. And then in between nanomedicine and epidemiology to connect the two. And on top of that, what we do is we develop so-called transversal projects between several research lines. So you saw that the centre has 6 and now 7 research lines. Transversal projects are those that are between at least 2 of these research lines and generally involve either a graduate student or a postdoc. This is our collaborative strategy, and this has been pretty successful in areas, for instance, involving research on exosomes and other things like angiotensin 19 and so on. The centre, of course, has collaborations with a large number of centres throughout Chile, ranging from Arica all the way down to Valdivia, and of course, the Daga, which also mentioned here. A centre like this depends, of course, to a simple extent on a large network of international collaboration, which is shown here. So each of the areas, let's say, has their own network of collaboration. In our case, the one shown here, and I'll be talking a little bit about the importance of this in my second talk. There was recently an evaluation of research centres in Chile, so this is something that was done by CEMC. It's not something that was instigated by the centre at all, so it was an unbiased evaluation of all the research centres in Chile. Research centres being either a university that does research or a research centre, like for instance ACCDiS. So all these were included in the evaluation. And rather surprising, what came out of that evaluation is that the centre ACCDiS was ranked number 3 in the country, which is quite surprising because it includes all universities. So rank number 1 was the Universidad de Chile, rank number 2 was the Pontificia Universidad Católica de Chile, and then ACCDiS as number 3 in the country in investigation, which is quite amazing considering that the 6 PIs compared with the university. So I think it's a safe bet to say that ACCDiS has consolidated itself as an important research centre. Is there anything there? No, I think that's it. Okay, that's it. Thank you for your attention.